they streaming?
Welcome to Communicating Bridges, Building Bridges of Hope. My name is Daddy Chitalu. Today we have a special interview. I bring to you Pastor Nathan Muyambango, a communication specialist and also a pastor. Pastor Muyambango is the Associate Communication Director for Northern Zambia Union Conference. The main reason of coming on this program is to highlight issues affecting the general public and also the church in terms of communication. It is said that communication is the lifeline of any institution. Pastor Nathan Muyambango, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Elder Daddy, for having me. And thank you for this time to address pertinent issues to do with communication.
Thank you so much, dear viewer, wherever you are watching us from. Remember to follow Hope Channel Facebook page and to like it. We continue and delve into this topic of communication. Pastor, before we go into the topic, who is Pastor Nathan Muyambango?
All right, a very interesting question, of course. My name is Nathan Muyambango. I'm married with 2 children. I'm a pastor of 14 years in pastoral ministry, uninterrupted, ordained. I'm a communication enthusiast. And with this regard, I think that's what brings us to where we are currently. I also need to mention that I'm still a church pastor at Minwood SDA Church under Midlands East Zambia Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists, of course.
Thank you so much when it comes to specialists, when it comes to communication.
Yes, please.
We have communication between the internal and the external publics. Can you shed more light on that?
All right. So every organization, which the Seventh-day Adventist is, has key stakeholders. So basically, you're talking about people that are affiliated to you implicitly or indirectly. So in this case, the Seventh-day Adventist Church does not exist in a vacuum. Yeah, our major key stakeholders are our church members, of course, leaders, pastors, and whatnot. But for internal and external publics, we are referring to our church members who are our internal publics, because they are a public, they are an audience who also have a perception of how things are going in the church. Then there's also the external publics, those that may not be our adherents, who look at the church from outside. They also begin to develop an impression about the church. And that is precisely the vision of the communication department, to manage perception, to ensure that we have a favorable public image in both the internal, in the eyes of the internal and the external publics.
A quick one, you've heard the internal and the external publics. In your own views, who are the most difficult? Who would give a different perspective? Who gives a negative perspective more between the two, the internal and the external? The church members and the outside?
Both. Yeah, because if both parties are not well managed, it can spiral into crisis. And part of the crisis can come about because of lack of information gap, where people don't know what is happening. it gives room to aspersions, misrepresentations, as well as misinformation. People become critical and people become suspicious of church leaders. So this being the case, by the way, for some of my studies, I did study with a public institution. And my dissertation had to do with...
I was coming to your qualifications.
Is
but
that
now,
so?
Now that you
Now
have
that we're
mentioned,
into it,
now
okay.
that you have mentioned, allow me to pose a question.
Yes, please.
On behalf of the viewers, some people may say Pastor Nathan Muyambango is still new and inexperienced. I would like to ask you, what are your qualifications, Pastor?
All right. I do have a bachelor's degree in theology, obviously. That's why I am a pastor. But besides that, I do have another bachelor's degree in mass communications. I do have a Master of Science degree in mass communication and public relations. So I'm both a pastor and also an expert in communication in my own right.
Thank you so much. We have heard today, at least he has spoken for himself. In case you thought Pastor Muyambango is not qualified for communication, he's got a Master's of Science in Communication and Public Relations. What a combination. Now share with us one experience where you managed to resolve a crisis or where you managed to resolve a challenge either with internal or external publics.
All right. I've been fortunate enough in my 14-year span of pastoral ministry. And by the way, I also need to mention that some of my reasons for pursuing this line of academia was for just to equip myself, because communication is a fabric that cuts across almost everything you do. You are as good as you are able to communicate. You know, when I decided to pursue this line of expertise, there were mixed feelings. People were not so sure. Is he planning to leave the ministry? What is he up to? But it's only later on that now people begin to appreciate that communication is actually, it enables us to communicate the gospel better. That said, as early as in my second year, we have had a number of issues where I've come through to help the church, even from the background. One of which is, there was a time, if you remember so well, in social media, when the the First Lady had put on Dorcas uniform.
Yes.
And well, that skyrocketed debate and whatnot. You know, some of our members were saying she's not a bona fide Dorcas worker. Why would she put on a uniform? Well, some still felt her being First Lady, she was privileged. You know, she can affiliate with any group. But then this debate was going on and on. I remember receiving a call from a friend of mine who said, "Are you not a public relations guy? I mean, this is your time."
That's crisis.
Yes, this is your time. Like, do something to help the church. I remember working through the night to put things together, to put a statement in my own individual capacity as a pastor, a district pastor, that time under South Zambia Conference. And after I had written a statement on the First Lady putting on uniform, bringing perspective, some, you know, our manuals, because we are guided by manuals, you know, and that kind of a thing. As basic as that may have been, which I posted on my own personal page, it was later adopted. We saw it flying all over, even on secular media, using it as an official statement from the church. And that, to a great deal, I think, helped to quell the crisis.
Thank you so much. You're saying as a church, the need for communications or PR or crisis management is very cardinal or has been lacking.
Come again?
Are you saying from the experience that you had of the First Lady,
Yes.
quenching the fire, do you think there has been a gap in communication in the church, in our church?
Well, let's call a spade a spade. Myself, came to learn that the church's communication department has been around for a long time. And I also came to unveil that this church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, does have a media policy. Only later in my studies when I was doing a research for my dissertation. Now, this is to qualify the fact that the church is so organized. We have everything in place. But sometimes we are not so sure where to lay our hands on. And that's why we find ourselves sometimes struggling to deal with certain matters. But in terms of policies, I think we are well equipped. We have the communications handbook. We have an adopted communication handbook for the North and the Southern Zambia Union. We do have enough guidance also from the SID working policy, the 2018-2019 edition. So a lot of things are in place. But sometimes when we find ourselves in those responsible positions, we may not be so sure how to go about certain things. Where policy is concerned, the church is covered.
Okay. You can guide me. I used to think the public relations component, which is under communication, was in the office of the executive secretary. Is it in the communications department?
All right, to begin with, the official spokesperson of the church is a president. So if there is an issue to do, that happens, for example, in a particular, Midlands East, where I'm coming from, or what happened in Lusaka conference, for example, where, you know, youths drowned in the Kariba. Yeah, the official spokesperson is the president who gives a statement. When it comes to public relations, as far as policies are concerned, and I will cite, in this case, the SID working policy under communication, 2018-2019 edition. The communications department has three functions. The first one is news and information. The second one is public relations. And the third one is the use of electronic and modern media. Now let's talk about public relations. Public relations deals with everything to do with media statements, press releases, crisis communication. That is a responsibility.
Event management.
There you are. That falls under public relations, and it falls under the office
crisis management.
Crisis management. It falls under the Department of Communication. However, we should also mention that the communications department does not work in isolation. Yeah, so he's consultative, and whatever communication department does should have the blessing of administration.
Pastor, in less than 1 year, if I were to be specific, in the next 9 months,
right,
we are going to have a session under Northern Zambia Union Conference. In these 9 months remaining, what strategies, what impact are you going to make? Can you please share with us what your plans are in the Department of Communication as an associate?
That's a big one. Thank you, Daddy. To begin with, strategy, propositions are invalid if they do not address the elephant in the room. So maybe we need to begin by identifying the downside. Currently, the crisis precurrent in the communication department. The current administration has been in service for 4 years, and they're going to the session in November. And we need to look at what has been happening in the Department of Communication. Yeah. So first and foremost, the church finds itself on the crossroads. There is so much competing media or negative publicity.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes leaders are thrown in bad light. Even our doctrines may be misinterpreted or misrepresented. You know, so leaders have to deal with the current social media crisis of that nature. And secondly, we have a huge following of people that are not so sure what is happening behind the walls. So there is an information gap between administration or church leaders, the general members, and now you can imagine the general public. So if this information does not trickle down, literally, a youth will call their elder to find out, Pastor, For my church heritage, I want to find out who's the publishing director at the union. Yeah. Now, this just shows you that our people are not aware of their leaders, and let alone they're not even aware of what our leaders are doing.
Not even the police.
Not even the policy. Yeah.
I cut you short a bit.
Yes.
I will bring you back where you are. In this digital era,
Yes.
where my Facebook, though private, but it's in the public, I can have negative influence.
Right.
Now, under communication as an associate, how are you going to control or manage these websites, social media platforms, and their misinformation or their public, negative publicity that they have as if they are not church members? They own those things. How are you going to control them?
All right, so we begin by categorizing negative publicity. Yeah, they are pages that are operating with a tag, Seventh-day Adventist, but they are privately owned. They could even be business pages. And the owners of those pages are people we live with. They come from our local churches. And where their membership lies, these are our friends. Sometimes they post us, you know, sometimes we ask them if we can feature, you know, on their pages because they have built themselves over time. Yeah, then they are individuals like me, myself, in my name. I open a page, you know, I garner followership, and because I'm SDA and my life is around SDA, and I begin to post things about SDA, and sometimes it could be in a very negative shade. So those are the two major categories. I also need to mention Elder Daddy. I'm not so sure if it's possible to successfully, completely combat negative publicity. However, there are certain interventions that can be put in place. We can be deliberate about it. To begin with, the 2018 Communication Policy Handbook that was adopted by the two unions here, they do address this crisis. And I think the problem has been on implementation. But then the quick alternatives that we could have, I for one, I would propose that instead of going rogue on these pages, these are our friends. Yeah, and sometimes you will find, though they may have a huge following, they may be lacking in certain tenets. Sometimes even the basics of journalism, basic ethics and professional ethics, professional, behaviors of managing, a page of that nature. So instead of us going hard on them, why don't we collaborate? They have the people, and the platform they have used, we cannot diffuse it. We need that platform as well to influence the world for Jesus. So what we should now begin to talk about is to have influencers summits, for example. Some of the big pages, which one can you think of? A big Facebook page that's not owned by the church, but it's a SDA-like.
We have the SDA, there's something called the SDA International.
Okay.
Yes.
There's